Okay, good afternoon. My name is Daniel Boggs. I'm the lead investigator here for the accident we have at Northwest Palm. First and foremost, on behalf of the NTSB, I would like to give out our sincere condolences to the family and friends of this accident. I do want to confirm that yesterday, I believe, I'm not sure what time it was, 2:10, that's right, at 2:10, we had a Piper PA-28-161 performing a touch and go landing here at the airport, go in at the pond at the end of 27 right, or 27 left, I'm sorry. The aircraft was built in 1979. It's actually a young aircraft for airplane age. We do have 2 fatals on that. I will not be giving out the names of those, as the medical examiner will take care of that for us. On board the aircraft, we did have a flight instructor and a private pilot who was taking flight lessons to get his instrument rating. They were on a long cross-country flight lesson. They took off from Pompano and they went over to Sarasota, back to Melbourne, and then up here to West Palm. They were going to do some touch and go landings. We do have the aircraft out of the pond down. It is going to be taken up to an aircraft salvage facility, which we will do a layout over the next 2 to 3 days. We're going to look at everything from the engine to the pilot qualifications, the airframe. We'll be looking a little bit closer at the weather, which I don't believe we impacted it, but we will look at the weather. We are going to look into the flight school that operated the aircraft, so we're kind of just going to be looking at all aspects of this flight. We don't really have a whole lot of information besides that at this point. We are pulling radar data. We will be looking at flight aware. We will be looking at all the available information that we have. Besides that, at this point, I don't know much more, so I will open it up for questions and ask what you guys got.
Can you explain for people who may not be familiar what it means when you say they were doing touch and go?
Sure. So whether different phases of their training, if they're practicing just to fly an airplane, they may come in and just practice a landing, and then they'll turn around and go back to the runway and take off, and they're just practicing takeoff and landings, most critical part of any flight. When you're upgrading your license to a private or a commercial or an instrument rating, then what you may be doing is you may be practicing instrument approaches and using your instruments on your dash more than you would. You may be what they call a hood, which simulates flying in the clouds, and you're dependent on all your instruments for your guidance and all. So just touch and go landings are just taking off and landing in the pattern and using their instruments to control their flight. Well, I'm sure as the flight school was located in Pompano, they use this airport a lot because it's a non-controlled tower, and they like to come to these airports because it's easier to get in and out of in flight, and it's not a lot of stress on a student pilot. So I don't know that for sure, but I would think that they have probably used this many times in the past. And he was a private pilot, he wasn't a student pilot, so he was a registered pilot.
How long does it take, in average, for an investigation to finally have a report and know what happened?
Okay, so the way that this will work is that, for the first 2 or 3 days, we do our on-site investigation. We look at the aircraft, we look at all the parameters of the flight. And then in about 2 weeks, I'm going to put out a preliminary report, and that basically tells the facts like I'm doing to you today. Then we do the detailed investigation, and we have to wait for the medical examiner to get me the report, and we wait for a lot of the metallurgy or anything that we may send to the lab. So usually from beginning to end is about 18 months before the final report is published.
And one more question. Usually when these unfortunate accidents happen, people get afraid. Can you just explain how safe air transportation is? I mean, statistically, it's the safest way to travel.
Aviation is very safe. I mean, these aircraft, you take a 1945 aircraft that actually was sitting out here earlier fueling up. those aircraft are required to go through extensive inspections once a year. So a mechanic, a licensed airframe and power plant mechanic, has to completely take that airplane apart. They inspect everything. They're looking for corrosion, wear, tear. The engines are controlled by the manufacturer, that after it reaches a certain flight hour or a calendar date, that they're required to be pulled off, completely overhauled. So aircraft are maintained up to a much, much higher standard than any automobile or boat or anything like that. So aviation is very safe to fly, yes.
Were there any calls that would have indicated they had some kind of mechanical issue?
No. We're going to look into that a little bit further to double check, but from what we have right now, because it's not a controlled airport, they weren't required to. They weren't required to say anything on the radio.
Have you released the name of the flexible?
I didn't hear you, I'm sorry.
Oh, have you released the name of the flexible?
Not yet. Not yet. We want to make sure that everybody's been notified.
You said Pompano's where it's based on. Is it a national flexible?
I don't know that yet. Unfortunately, I've been dealing with the airplane, so I don't know that yet.
And is the plane they were flying, is that a typical plane that is used?
Oh, yeah, very much so. Piper P-8 is one of the number one aircrafts at flight school. That and Cessna is what everybody uses, yeah.
That's a single engine? Just kind of describe that plane.
It's a low wing. It's a low wing aircraft like any of these low wing aircraft you see out here. It's a 4-seater. Usually they've got either 150 or 180 horse engine in them. Real good, sturdy, trustworthy aircraft. Perfect pilot trainers. They're great for small families or pilots that are trying to build their hours to become commercial pilots. They're good airplanes.
Do you have the tail number to release?
I do. November 81250.